Hello everyone. My name is Nova Chen Williams, and looking back, I was 27 when my entire family dynamic did a pirouette worthy of a prima ballerina, all thanks to a baby shower and a pile of exquisitely embroidered onesies. They thought I was just playing with fabrics and dreams, a flighty girl with a silly, expensive hobby. Little did they know, as they cooed over those chic, designer baby clothes at my sister Clara's shower, that their little Nova, the one they dismissed for years, was about to unravel their entire perception of her. Have you ever been so underestimated that the eventual reveal felt less like a quiet correction and more like dropping a perfectly crafted, silk-lined bomb in the middle of a polite tea party? Because that's exactly what it felt like. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from today. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And hey, if you've ever had to fight tooth and nail for your dreams while those closest to you just, well, didn't quite get it, or maybe even actively tried to steer you down a sensible path, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps to know you're not alone. And please, subscribe if you believe in the power of quiet perseverance, the kind that eventually leads to a very, very satisfying "I told you so" moment, even if you're too classy to actually say the words out loud. My childhood was, on the surface, perfectly normal. We lived in a pleasant suburban house, 2 parents, 2 daughters. I was the younger one, Nova. My sister, Clara, was 3 years older, and from as far back as I can remember, she was the benchmark. Clara was the sensible one, the academic achiever, the one whose path was clearly marked and universally approved of. She excelled in school, aimed for a secure profession, law, in her case, and never gave my parents a moment's worry. I, on the other hand, was the dreamer. While Clara was buried in textbooks, I was lost in sketchbooks, my fingers perpetually smudged with charcoal or paint, my bedroom a chaotic landscape of fabric scraps, half-finished projects, and fashion magazines. My passion for design wasn't just a fleeting interest, it was the language my soul spoke. I'd spend hours redesigning my own clothes, then my doll's clothes, then cautiously offering to improve my friends' outfits. My mother, bless her practical heart, would pat my head and say things like, "That's a nice hobby, dear, very creative." Hobby, that word always stung a little. My father, a man of few words and even fewer opinions on anything creative, usually just nodded along with Mom, his mind clearly on more important matters, some 7 times our heaven dod. Like the stock market or Clara's debate club victories. The comparisons were never overt, not in a cruel way, but they were there, woven into the fabric of our family life. Clara got straight A's again, isn't that wonderful? Followed by a slightly strained, and Nova made a very colorful scarf. Good for you, dear. The implication was always clear. Clara was building a future. I was dabbling. When it came time for university, Clara's law school applications were a family project, met with enthusiasm and financial backing. My desire to go to design school was met with concern. "Are you sure, Nova?" Mom had asked, her brow furrowed. "It's so competitive, so unstable. What kind of a living can you really make from sewing?" My father had added, "Clara's law degree is an investment. This design thing, it's a gamble, Nova. A big one." They didn't say no, not outright, but the support, both emotional and financial, was lukewarm at best. Clara's tuition was covered, her living expenses sorted. I pieced together scholarships, worked part-time jobs all through high school to save up, and chose a less prestigious but more affordable design program in a city a few hours away. It felt like they were humoring me, waiting for me to come to my senses and switch to a business degree or something equally safe. Our extended family, a chorus of aunts, uncles, and cousins, largely echoed my parents' sentiments. Aunt Agnes, Mom's older sister, was particularly vocal. She was a woman who valued tangible success, a good marriage, a big house, children in respectable professions. My artistic inclinations were, in her eyes, a sign of impending spinsterhood and financial ruin. "Still playing with your crayons, Nova?" She'd ask at family gatherings, even when I was in my late teens. "Clara's interning at a top law firm this summer." Now that's a girl with her head screwed on straight. Uncle Ben, her husband, would usually just chuckle and agree. They were a team, reinforcing the family narrative. The message was clear. Clara was the star, her path illuminated and celebrated. Mine was a shadowy sidetrack, tolerated but not encouraged, something I was expected to outgrow. It wasn't malicious, not always. I think they genuinely believed they were guiding me towards a better, more secure life. But their version of better felt like a cage to me, a beautifully upholstered, socially acceptable cage, but a cage nonetheless, and all I wanted was to fly. The seeds of conflict weren't just sown, they were deeply rooted, fertilized by years of subtle dismissal and well-intentioned, but misguided, concern. I knew, even then, that proving them wrong wouldn't be easy. But the thought of not trying, of succumbing to their vision for my life, was simply unbearable. My journey was always going to be an uphill one, paved with their doubts and my quiet, stubborn determination. The escalation from subtle dismissal to a more pronounced form of injustice didn't happen overnight. It was a slow burn, a gradual turning up of the heat until I felt like I was constantly simmering in a pot of invalidated ambition. But the moment things truly crystallized, the point where their disregard for my chosen path became undeniably overt, was around the time Clara announced her pregnancy. It wasn't just one event, but a series of them, all leading up to the infamous baby shower that would become my accidental stage. I had recently graduated from design school, not top of my class, but with a portfolio I was proud of and a small, award-winning collection that had garnered some local media attention. It was a modest success, but to me, it felt monumental. I'd poured my heart, soul, and what little money I had into it. I'd invited my parents and Clara to my graduate showcase. Mom and Dad came, though Dad spent half the time checking his phone. Clara had a work thing she couldn't get out of. "So sorry, Nova, you know how demanding the firm is," she'd said, her voice breezy over the phone. I did know. Her demands always seemed to eclipse mine. My parents had looked at my designs, the intricate beadwork, the innovative cuts. Mom had said, "It's very artistic, dear." Dad had nodded. "Good job." Then they'd asked if I'd started looking for a real job yet. Maybe something in retail management at a department store to tide you over. The small newspaper clipping about my award, which I'd shyly shown them, was glanced at and quickly set aside. "That's nice," Mom had said, before launching into a detailed account of Clara's latest courtroom triumph. It was like my achievement was a footnote in the grand family narrative of Clara's successes. Then came Clara's news. She was pregnant. The family exploded with joy, and rightfully so. A new baby is wonderful news. But the sheer scale of the excitement, the immediate shift of all focus, all resources, all conversation onto Clara and the impending arrival was staggering. My recent graduation, my small wins, were instantly forgotten, dust motes in the blinding light of Clara's maternal glow. My parents were ecstatic. Grandchild number 1. The calls between Mom and Clara became constant, planning, discussing, cooing. It was during one of these early pregnancy buzz conversations that the first really sharp barb landed. I was visiting my parents and Mom was on the phone with Aunt Agnes, the volume loud enough for me to hear. "Yes, Clara's just radiant," Mom gushed. "We're thinking of throwing a huge shower, of course, only the best for her and the baby. No, Nova's fine, still doing her fashion thing. Yes, I know. Hopefully, seeing Clara settle down and start a family will give her some ideas. It's time she thought about more serious things, don't you think?" I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. My fashion thing, as if it were some childish pastime I refused to relinquish. The implication that my career, my passion, was inherently less serious than starting a family. I didn't begrudge Clara her happiness, not for a second. But did her new chapter have to completely invalidate mine? I tried, tentatively, to share my plans, my dreams of starting my own small label. I'd even sketched out some ideas for a high-end baby clothing line, inspired by the news, thinking maybe, just maybe, this was something they could understand. Something tangible related to the new family focus. I showed Mom some sketches. "Oh, those are sweet, Nova," she'd said, her eyes already drifting towards a baby name book Clara had left on the coffee table. "But Clara will want proper designer things, you know. From established brands. It's her first baby, everything has to be perfect." "I was thinking this could be an established brand one day, Mom," I'd said, my voice smaller than I intended. She'd patted my hand. "That's ambitious, dear. But perhaps focus on getting a steady job first, eh? You can always sew for your own children one day, if you meet a nice young man." The dismissal was breathtaking. It wasn't just that they didn't believe in my ability to succeed, they didn't even seem to register my ambition as legitimate. My father was no better. When I mentioned trying to secure a small business loan, he'd frowned. "Nova, be sensible, you have no collateral, no real business experience. Clara's husband, Mark, is already setting up a trust fund for the baby. That's financial planning. Your sketches are not." Clara herself, caught up in her own whirlwind, was oblivious. When I'd tried to talk to her about my work, she'd listen with half an ear, then steer the conversation back to morning sickness or nursery colors. "That's great, Nova, really," she'd say distractedly. "Oh, did I tell you? We're looking at these amazing organic cotton onesies from that little boutique downtown. So expensive, but so worth it." The irony was, the boutique she was talking about was one I was desperately trying to get my designs into. The despair was a heavy cloak. I felt invisible, my dreams transparent. There were nights I'd sit in my tiny apartment, surrounded by fabric and patterns, and just weep. What was the point? Why was I working so hard, sacrificing so much for something my own family saw as a frivolous joke? Was I delusional? Were they right? The thought was a bitter pill. Maybe I should just give up, find that sensible job, and resign myself to a life of quiet, creative frustration. But beneath the hurt and confusion, a tiny, stubborn ember of defiance began to glow. Their dismissal, their blatant favoritism, their inability to see my worth, it started to feel less like a reflection of my inadequacy and more like a reflection of their limited vision. They saw a narrow, pre-approved path to success and happiness, and anything outside those lines was suspect. My path was different, unconventional, and yes, risky, but it was mine. And the more they pushed me to abandon it, the more determined I became to walk it, if only to prove to myself that I could. The baby shower, still months away, began to loom in my mind, not just as another family event where I'd be sidelined, but as a deadline. A point by which I had to have something to show, not for them, but for me. The injustice wasn't just a catalyst, it was becoming fuel. That period, after the sting of their dismissive reactions to Clara's pregnancy and their continued obliviousness to my aspirations, became a crucible. The hurt was real, a dull ache that settled deep in my bones. But alongside it, something else began to take root, a steely resolve. I made a vow, not to anyone else, but to myself, whispered into the quiet of my cramped studio apartment, surrounded by the tools of my silly hobby. I would succeed. Not to win their approval. I was slowly, painfully, starting to realize that their approval might be a currency I could no longer afford to covet, but to validate my own path, my own worth. And a specific idea began to crystallize, that high-end baby clothing line. If they were so obsessed with the best for Clara's baby, I would create the best. The irony was delicious, a private little joke that fueled me through countless late nights. I decided on a name for this fledgling brand. Petit Éclat. Little sparkle, little shine. It felt right. The journey of building Petit Éclat from a mere concept into a tangible reality was, without a doubt, the hardest thing I had ever done. The hardships were relentless, a daily barrage of challenges that tested every ounce of my resilience. My studio was a corner of my already tiny living room, crammed with a second-hand industrial sewing machine, cutting tables made from salvage doors, and bolts of fabric that seemed to multiply overnight. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't often afford. I'd work my part-time job at a local coffee shop during the day, a job my parents probably thought was my only real income, then rush home to spend the next 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours hunched over my designs, sketching, cutting, sewing, and resewing. The scent of coffee from my day job mingled with the smell of new cotton and silk, a constant reminder of my double life. Financially, it was a nightmare. I poured every penny I had, every penny I earned, into Petit Éclat. My savings dwindled to nothing. I took out a small, high-interest loan from a less-than-reputable lender because traditional banks wouldn't even look at my business plan. My diet consisted primarily of instant noodles, toast, and an unhealthy amount of caffeine. There were days I'd have to choose between buying a crucial yard of fabric or buying groceries for the week. Fabric usually won. I learned to be incredibly resourceful, haunting thrift stores for vintage lace, sourcing end-of-roll designer silks at a discount, bartering my design skills for services I needed. The creative process itself was both exhilarating and exhausting. I was determined that Petit Éclat would be synonymous with quality and unique design. I spent weeks researching sustainable and ethically sourced materials, organic cottons, bamboo fabrics, hypoallergenic silks. I wanted every piece to be soft, safe, and beautiful. My designs were intricate, inspired by vintage children's illustrations and natural forms. I refused to cut corners. Each sample was hand-finished, each tiny buttonhole meticulously stitched. But with this commitment to quality came setbacks. Suppliers delivered the wrong materials, colors weren't quite right, my aging sewing machine would break down at the most critical moments. There were early rejections from boutiques, polite but firm "not for us" emails that felt like personal failures. The emotional toll was immense. Loneliness was a constant companion. Self-doubt gnawed at me, especially late at night when the caffeine wore off and the weight of my family's disapproval felt heaviest. Was I just throwing my life away on a pipe dream? But I wasn't entirely alone. Slowly, a small but vital support system began to emerge, like unexpected wildflowers pushing through concrete. My best friend from design school, Chloe, was my rock. She lived in another city, pursuing her own fashion dreams, but we had weekly video calls that were my lifeline. She was the one person who truly understood the industry, the struggles, the small victories. "Nova, that layette set is divine." She'd shriek with genuine enthusiasm when I showed her a new design. "You've got this. Don't let those old-fashioned relatives get you down. They wouldn't know haute couture if it bit them on the bum." Her unwavering belief was like a shot of adrenaline. Then there was Grandma May, my maternal grandmother. She lived several states away, a tiny, formidable woman with a wicked sense of humor and a surprisingly progressive outlook. She'd always had a soft spot for my creative side. While my parents wrung their hands, Grandma May would call and say, "Darling Nova, I heard you're starting your own business. Good for you. Don't listen to the nervous Nellies. Your grandfather, he started with nothing but a pushcart and a dream. You have talent, child. Use it." Her calls were infrequent, but her words carried immense weight. She sent me a small check once, tucked into a card with a pressed flower. "For your sparkles," the note read. It made me cry. Unexpectedly, I also found a mentor in Mr. Henderson, one of my former design professors. I'd run into him at a fabric fair looking lost and overwhelmed. He'd taken me for coffee, listened patiently to my plans for Petit Éclat, and then, instead of dismissing them, he'd offered concrete advice. He connected me with a reliable, small-batch manufacturer who was willing to take a chance on a new designer. He critiqued my business plan, tough but fair, and helped me refine my branding. His practical guidance was invaluable. And then there was Liam. We'd met at the coffee shop where I worked. He was a freelance graphic designer, often camping out with his laptop for hours. He was quiet, observant, and incredibly kind. He saw past the tired barista apron to the determined designer underneath. Liam became my sounding board, my late-night emergency fabric run driver, my amateur photographer for early product shots, and my chief cheerleader. He helped me build my first website for Petit Éclat, patiently explaining SEO and e-commerce platforms. He never once questioned my ambition or my sanity, even when I was at my lowest ebb. His quiet, steady belief was a balm to my often frayed nerves. The contrast between this cocoon of genuine support and the attitude of my immediate family was stark and often painful. While I was wrestling with thread tensions and cash flow, Clara was blissfully navigating her third trimester, the recipient of endless advice, unsolicited gifts, and fawning attention. Family dinners, when I could drag myself to them, were an exercise in frustration. The conversation would inevitably revolve around Clara's nursery decor, her choice of obstetrician, the latest ultrasound pictures. If I tried to mention a small breakthrough with Petit Éclat, my first online sale, a positive comment on an early blog feature, it would be met with a polite nod before the conversation immediately swerved back to baby names. "Oh, you sold a little bonnet online, Nova. That's nice," Mom would say, her smile a little too bright. "Clara was just telling me, Mark's mother is knitting the most exquisite cashmere blanket for the baby. Pure cashmere, can you imagine?" Aunt Agnes, if present, would invariably add her 2 cents. "Good for you, keeping busy with your sewing, Nova. But Clara, dear, have you decided on a christening gown yet?" I know a wonderful little place, very traditional, very high-end. Nothing like what Nova makes, of course, but proper. The implication was always there. My work was nice, keeping busy, a hobby. Clara's impending motherhood and all its trappings was proper, high-end, serious. They were living in a different universe, one where my struggles and achievements were insignificant background noise to the main event. It was infuriating, but it also solidified my resolve. I stopped trying to explain. I stopped seeking their validation. I just put my head down and worked, fueled by caffeine, determination, and the quiet encouragement of my chosen few. Petit Éclat was growing, slowly but surely, like a secret garden they couldn't see, and wouldn't appreciate even if they could. Not yet, anyway. The months leading up to Clara's baby shower were a blur of relentless work, punctuated by small, thrilling victories for Petit Éclat. My first significant milestone was a consistent trickle, then a steady stream, of online sales. Each notification chime on my phone was a tiny jolt of validation. Strangers, people with no obligation to be kind, were choosing to spend their hard-earned money on my designs. Then came the reviews. Mommy bloggers, those arbiters of taste in the baby world, started discovering Petit Éclat. One influential blogger, known for her discerning eye for luxury children's wear, wrote a glowing review, calling my designs heirloom quality and breathtakingly unique. My website traffic spiked. Emboldened, I approached a few carefully selected high-end children's boutiques. Most still said no, but one, Cherub's Corner, a very exclusive shop in a wealthy part of the city, the kind of place my sister Clara and Aunt Agnes would definitely approve of, agreed to take a small consignment. The owner, a chic, no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Albright, had grilled me about my fabrics, my production, my vision. She'd examined my samples with a jeweler's loupe. Finally, she'd nodded curtly. "All right, Miss Chen Williams, your quality is undeniable. Let's see if my clientele agree." Seeing my tiny, hand-stitched Petit Éclat labels hanging amongst established European brands in her shop was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. Then came the lucky break every new designer dreams of. A minor celebrity, an actress known for her impeccable style, was photographed leaving Cherub's Corner with her newborn, the baby snugly wrapped in one of my signature Petit Éclat blankets, a delicate, hand-embroidered cashmere blend. The photo went viral in certain parenting circles. Suddenly, Petit Éclat had buzz. Orders surged. I had to hire a part-time assistant, a fellow design graduate named Maya, just to keep up with packing and shipping from my tiny apartment. I was still operating on a shoestring, but for the first time I felt like this could actually be a viable business, not just a passion project. I was careful though. The brand name, Petit Éclat, was sophisticated and deliberately French-sounding. It wasn't obviously linked to Nova Chen Williams. I didn't plaster my face all over the website. I wanted the brand to speak for itself, and I certainly wasn't broadcasting my growing success to my family. Let them think I was still just playing dress-up. Their dismissal, predictably, continued unabated. If anything, it intensified as Clara's pregnancy progressed and the baby shower planning went into overdrive. My mother would call, not to ask about me, but to get my input on shower themes, always with a subtle dig. "We're thinking Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Nova." Very sweet, don't you think? Of course, the decorations will be professionally done. We want everything to be perfect for Clara. The unspoken contrast, my artistic endeavors were amateurish. Clara's life events required professional perfection. During one family visit, Clara was excitedly scrolling through websites on her tablet. "Oh, Mom, look at this," she exclaimed. "It's that new line I was telling you about, Petit Éclat. Isn't it just divine? Their rompers are apparently to die for, so exclusive though, and the prices. But for my little angel, only the best." My heart did a little flip. I kept my face carefully neutral. Aunt Agnes, who was also there, peered over Clara's shoulder. "Petit Éclat? Sounds French, probably imported. Very nice, Clara. That's the kind of quality you should be looking for, not like those homemade things Nova fiddles with." She actually gestured vaguely in my direction without looking at me. "You wouldn't know about this kind of brand, Nova dear. It's very high-end, for people with discerning taste." I just smiled faintly and murmured, "It does look lovely." The urge to say something, anything, was immense, but I bit my tongue. "Not yet, the timing wasn't right. But oh, the irony was a rich, dark chocolate I savored in private. They were unknowingly praising my work, holding it up as the gold standard, while simultaneously denigrating me. It was almost comical. There was one small crack in the wall of family indifference though. My cousin Sarah, Aunt Agnes's daughter, had always been quieter, more observant than the rest. She was a few years younger than me and studying journalism. One afternoon she called me out of the blue. "Nova, it's Sarah. Listen, this is going to sound weird, but I was doing some research for an article on emerging local designers and I stumbled across Petit Éclat. The aesthetic, it just screamed you, and the name, Little Sparkle, that's something you would come up with, is it? Are you behind it?" I hesitated for a moment, then confessed. "Yes, Sarah, it's mine, but please, keep it quiet for now, especially from your mother and the rest of them." Sarah let out a low whistle. "Wow, Nova, that's incredible. The stuff is gorgeous. I saw that celebrity photo. My mom would have a fit if she knew." There was a note of admiration in her voice I hadn't heard before. "Don't worry," she added. "Your secret's safe with me, but for what it's worth, I'm seriously impressed." Her unexpected support was a small, warm glow. It meant more than she knew. As the date of the baby shower approached, the family talk intensified. It was going to be a lavish affair at a fancy golf club, organized with military precision by Mom and Aunt Agnes. Gifts were a major topic of conversation. Clara, bless her heart, had not been shy about her preferences. She'd casually mentioned to Mom several times how much she adored Petit Éclat and how she was dreaming of a few key pieces from their latest collection. Mom, of course, relayed this to the family gift-buying contingent. "Clara has her heart set on some things from this very exclusive brand, Petit Éclat," she'd announced during a family call. "It's terribly expensive, of course, but it's what she wants." A plan began to form in my mind, a delicious, audacious plan. This baby shower, this monument to Clara's impending motherhood and the family's traditional values, would be my stage. Not for a confrontation, not for an angry outburst, but for a quiet, undeniable revelation. I started preparing. I selected the most exquisite items from my Petit Éclat collection, a layette set in the softest organic Pima cotton, embroidered with tiny iridescent stars. A hand-knitted cashmere cardigan with mother-of-pearl buttons, a charming mobile with delicate, silk-winged creatures. I wrapped them myself, not in the official Petit Éclat packaging, but in simple, elegant paper, with a plain gift tag. "To Clara and baby, with love, Nova." Let them think I'd just bought something nice for once. The actual gift, the one I was truly preparing, was the truth. And I had a feeling it was going to be quite the showstopper. The air was thick with anticipation, not just for the baby, but for my own quiet, carefully orchestrated debut. The day of the baby shower dawned bright and sunny, almost mockingly cheerful. The golf club ballroom was festooned with pastel balloons and an avalanche of tulle. Tables were laden with tiny cupcakes and artfully arranged finger sandwiches. It was a sea of floral dresses, polite laughter, and the clinking of teacups, exactly the kind of event my mother and Aunt Agnes excelled at orchestrating. Clara, radiant in a pale blue empire waist dress, was holding court, surrounded by a gaggle of cooing relatives and friends. I, in a simple but well-cut dress of my own design, though no one would know it, felt like an anthropologist observing a strange and baffling tribe. I made sure my carefully wrapped gifts were placed prominently on the overflowing gift table. The air was thick with anticipation as Clara finally settled into the plush, beribboned mother-to-be throne for the gift-opening ceremony. One by one, presents were unwrapped, a silver rattle from a distant aunt, a practical diaper pail from a sensible cousin, a mountain of adorable, if generic, baby clothes. Each gift was met with oohs and ahs, and polite exclamations from Clara. Then Mom, playing master of ceremonies, picked up one of my larger, elegantly wrapped boxes. "Oh, this one is from Nova," she announced, perhaps a touch too brightly, as if to preemptively excuse its assumed inadequacy. Clara began to unwrap it. As the paper fell away to reveal the Petit Éclat layette set, a collective gasp went around the room. The fabric seemed to almost glow, the tiny embroidered stars catching the light. "Oh my goodness," exclaimed one of Clara's friends. Is that Petit Éclat? It's stunning." Clara's eyes widened. She lifted the tiny gown, her fingers tracing the delicate embroidery. It is. Oh, Nova, it's exquisite. How did you ever… Before I could answer, Aunt Agnes, who had leaned in for a closer look, chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension even as she admired the item. Well, well, Nova. It seems you finally took my advice and bought something of real quality. This Petit Éclat brand is simply divine, isn't it, Clara? So exclusive. You see, Nova? She said, turning to me with a smug smile. This is what I mean by high-end. Perhaps you could learn a thing or two from brands like this, if you ever decide to get serious about your little sewing projects. This is craftsmanship. Several other women murmured their agreement, admiring the layette. Another of my gifts was opened, the cashmere cardigan. More gasps. Petit Éclat again. Clara, you are so lucky. Someone clearly has very good taste and a generous budget. One of Mom's friends tittered, winking at my mother as if to congratulate her on my supposed splurge. The mobile was unwrapped last, its silk creatures twirling gently. It was the pièce de résistance. The room was buzzing. Everything from Petit Éclat, it must have cost a fortune. Clara, your baby is going to be the best dressed in town. Aunt Agnes puffed up, clearly taking some credit for having identified the brand's worth. Yes, it just goes to show, quality speaks for itself. It's a world away from, well, you know. She gave a little dismissive flick of her wrist, presumably in the direction of my imagined attic sweatshop. I let the chorus of admiration reach its crescendo. I watched my mother beam with pride, not at me, but at the perceived expense and good taste of the gifts. I saw Clara's genuine delight. I saw Aunt Agnes preening. My cousin Sarah caught my eye from across the room and gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Liam, who I'd brought as my +1, squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes twinkling. Then, when there was a slight lull, I took a calm breath. My voice, when I spoke, was clear and steady, cutting through the residual chatter. Actually, Aunt Agnes, I began, my tone polite but firm, I do know a little bit about the quality and craftsmanship of Petit Éclat. I paused, letting all eyes turn to me. The room fell silent. I continued, meeting her gaze directly, then letting my eyes sweep across my mother, my father, and Clara. Considering I designed it all. Petit Éclat is my company. I'm the owner and head designer. For a moment, absolute silence reigned. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. Then, I reached into my clutch and pulled out a slim, elegant business card. It was cream-colored, with Petit Éclat embossed in gold, and underneath, in smaller, discreet letters, Nova Chen Williams, Founder, Creative Director. I placed it gently on the table in front of Aunt Agnes. The reaction was everything I had quietly anticipated, and more. Aunt Agnes stared at the card as if it were a venomous snake. Her jaw, which had been set in such a smug line moments before, literally dropped. Her face went from ruddy self-satisfaction to a mottled collection of reds and whites. She sputtered, like a car failing to start. What? My mother looked as though she'd seen a ghost. Her hand flew to her chest, her face paling dramatically. Dad, who had been looking rather bored, suddenly snapped to attention, his eyes wide and uncomprehending, darting from me to the exquisite clothes in Clara's lap, then back to me. Clara was the most interesting. Her initial shock quickly morphed into a dawning, complex expression. I saw disbelief, then confusion, then a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it embarrassment? Awe? Maybe even a sliver of pride? She looked down at the Petit Éclat items in her hands as if seeing them for the first time, then up at me, her mouth slightly agape. The other guests were a tableau of astonishment. Whispers erupted, heads turned. People were looking back and forth between me, my stunned family, and the luxurious baby gifts that now seemed to carry an entirely new significance. Some of Clara's friends, the younger ones, looked intrigued, impressed. Some of my mother's friends looked profoundly uncomfortable, suddenly realizing the implications of Aunt Agnes's earlier dismissive remarks. Cousin Sarah, however, was openly grinning now, giving me a subtle thumbs up. Liam simply beamed, squeezing my hand again, his pride a warm, steady presence beside me. the perfectly orchestrated baby shower had just been spectacularly, beautifully, derailed, and I, Nova Chen Williams, the dismissed dreamer, was holding the conductor's baton. The immediate aftermath of my quiet bombshell was a delicious sort of chaos. The polite, predictable hum of the baby shower shattered, replaced by a stunned, buzzing energy. For a few long moments, my core family members, Mom, Dad, Aunt Agnes, seemed frozen, statues in a museum of their own making titled Shock and Disbelief. It was Clara who broke the spell, her voice a little breathless. "Nova, your Petit Éclat, really?" She looked from the clothes in her lap to my face, her eyes wide. "Yes, Clara," I said calmly. "I am." Suddenly, a ripple of applause started, initiated by some of Clara's younger friends and, to my surprise, by Mrs. Albright from Cherub's Corner, who I hadn't realized was a distant acquaintance of my mother's and was among the guests. She caught my eye and gave a crisp, approving nod. The applause grew, a wave of genuine appreciation from people who, just moments before, had no idea who I was or what I did. My vindication was immediate and very, very public. The Petit Éclat gifts, already admired, suddenly took on an almost mythical status. Women were leaning closer, examining the stitching, murmuring about the design, the quality. "She made these? She owns the whole brand?" The whispers were now filled with awe instead of just polite appreciation for expensive items. Aunt Agnes, meanwhile, looked like she might spontaneously combust. Her face was a battleground of conflicting emotions, embarrassment, anger, and a dawning, horrified realization of how foolish she must sound. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, for once utterly speechless. Mom looked like she wanted the plush carpet to swallow her whole. She kept darting nervous glances at me, then at the other guests, her smile frozen in a rictus of social agony. Dad just kept shaking his head slowly, as if trying to reboot his understanding of the world. Several guests, particularly Clara's friends and some of the more progressive younger relatives, came over to congratulate me. "Nova, that's incredible." One gushed, "Your designs are absolutely beautiful, I had no idea." Another, a friend of Clara's who was a marketing executive, handed me her card. "We should talk. I'm seriously impressed with your branding. The validation wasn't just sweet, it was empowering." I handled the sudden attention with a grace I didn't know I possessed, answering questions, accepting compliments, a small, genuine smile on my face. This wasn't about gloating, it was about finally being seen. The loss of standing for my primary detractors was palpable. Aunt Agnes, after her initial paralysis, attempted a clumsy backtrack. "Well, Nova," she boomed, her voice a little too loud, a little too forced. "Why didn't you say something? We always knew you were talented. Just a hidden talent, eh?" She laughed, a hollow, nervous sound that fooled no one. The memory of her dismissive pronouncements about homemade things and little sewing projects hung heavy in the air. Her authority, at least on matters of taste and career advice, had evaporated. My mother tried a similar tactic, rushing over to hug me tightly. "Oh, Nova, darling, we're so proud. We had no idea you were this successful. You kept it such a secret." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, of pride or mortification, I couldn't quite tell, probably a bit of both. The carefully constructed narrative of sensible Clara and flighty Nova had crumbled around them, and they were left standing in the rubble, looking utterly bewildered. Their power to define me, to belittle my ambitions, was gone. My true support system, though small, rallied magnificently. Liam was by my side, his quiet pride a solid anchor. Cousin Sarah came over and gave me a huge, beaming hug. "I knew it," she whispered. "You showed them, Nova. You really showed them." Grandma May, when I called her later that evening to recount the tale, let out a whoop of delight that nearly deafened me. "Atta girl, Nova, that's my granddaughter. Gave them a taste of their own medicine, did you? Wonderful." Chloe, when I texted her the news, responded with a string of celebratory emojis and a promise to open champagne in my honor. Their joy was pure, untainted by the complex emotions swirling around my immediate family. The rest of the baby shower was awkward, for my parents and Aunt Agnes at least. They moved through the remainder of the event with fixed smiles and a palpable air of discomfort. The conversation, when it touched on me or my work, was stilted and cautious. The dynamic had irrevocably shifted. After the guests had departed and the pastel debris of the party was being cleared away, came the first tentative attempts at reconciliation, or perhaps damage control. "Nova," my mother began, her voice hesitant as she approached me in the now quiet ballroom. We owe you an apology. We clearly underestimated you." "Yes, Nova," my father added, looking genuinely sheepish. We didn't understand. Fashion, it always seemed so frivolous. But this Petit Éclat, it's a real business, a successful one." Their apologies were clumsy, laced with justifications, but there was a hint of sincerity there, born perhaps more out of embarrassment than true understanding, but it was a start. Aunt Agnes characteristically avoided me, bustling about collecting her things, muttering about needing to get home. No apology from her, not yet. That would take longer if it ever came at all. Clara was the most complex. She approached me after Mom and Dad had made their awkward peace offerings. Her eyes were searching, a mix of admiration and something else, perhaps a touch of regret for her own earlier blindness. "Nova," she said softly, "Petit Éclat. It's really amazing. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at my sister, the golden child, the one who had always had the spotlight. "Honestly, Clara," I replied, my voice gentle but firm, "would you have believed me? Or would you have just thought it was another one of Nova's little projects? Would any of you have truly listened before today?" Clara had the grace to look down, a faint flush rising on her cheeks. She didn't have an answer, and in that moment, I knew that things had changed, fundamentally and forever. I no longer needed their permission, their approval, or even their understanding to define my own success. I was defining it myself, one exquisite stitch at a time. The terms of our relationships from this day forward would be on my terms. In the weeks and months that followed the baby shower revelation, life settled into a new kind of normal, one where my professional identity was no longer a secret to be guarded or a hobby to be dismissed. Petit Éclat, already on an upward trajectory, benefited immensely from the unexpected publicity and the newfound respect, however grudging from some quarters, it had garnered within my extended family and their social circles. Orders continued to increase. More boutiques approached me. I was even featured in a national parenting magazine as a designer to watch. The little sparkle was becoming a significant gleam. I was finally able to move Petit Éclat out of my cramped apartment and into a proper studio space, a bright, airy loft in a converted warehouse district. I hired Maya, my part-time assistant, full-time, and then another junior designer to help with the workload. Walking into my own buzzing studio each morning, filled with the hum of sewing machines, the chatter of my small team, and the sight of my designs coming to life, was a daily affirmation of how far I'd come. I had financial stability, creative fulfillment, and a deep sense of pride in what I was building. More importantly, I had a quiet, unshakable self-assurance that had been hard-won. I was no longer seeking external validation, I was generating my own. I was living life on my own terms, finally free from the weight of my family's expectations and their narrow definitions of success. The long-term status of my relationships with my family evolved, as relationships often do after a significant shakeup. My parents made a concerted effort to be more supportive, though it was often clumsy and tinged with a new, slightly awestruck respect that felt foreign. They started bragging about our daughter, Nova, the fashion designer, to their friends, sometimes embellishing the story of my success as if they'd been my biggest cheerleaders all along. I learned to smile politely and accept their newfound pride, understanding that it was their way of recalibrating, of trying to fit me into a new, more impressive box in their minds. Our relationship became more cordial, more respectful, but also more bounded. I visited on my terms, shared what I was comfortable sharing, and maintained a healthy emotional distance when needed. The old dynamic of me seeking their approval was gone, replaced by a more equal, if sometimes still slightly awkward, footing. Clara and I found a new path forward, one that surprised me. After the initial shock of the baby shower wore off, a genuine respect began to grow between us. She became one of Petit Éclat's most enthusiastic and frequent customers, dressing my niece, Lily, almost exclusively in my designs. Lily became my adorable, unofficial brand ambassador. Clara would often call me for advice, not just about baby clothes, but about other things too, treating me as an equal, a peer, for the first time in our lives. One afternoon, while we were having coffee, just the two of us, she looked at me with a sincerity that touched me deeply. "Nova," she said, "I was a bit of an idiot, wasn't I? Back then, I was so caught up in my own world, in what Mom and Dad expected, I never really saw you or your talent. I'm truly sorry for that." Her apology, heartfelt and unprompted, healed a wound I hadn't realized was still tender. Our sisterhood found a new, stronger foundation built on mutual respect rather than ingrained family roles. As for Aunt Agnes and some of the other more critical relatives, their attitudes shifted from dismissive to cautiously deferential, and in some cases, outright sycophantic. Aunt Agnes would now greet me with overly enthusiastic hugs and loud pronouncements about my genius. She'd corner me at family events, seeking my expert opinion on fashion choices for her friends' grandchildren. I remained civil, polite, but I never forgot her earlier condescension. Some bridges, once burned, can only be rebuilt with very careful, very limited access. Forgiveness was a process, and for some, trust would likely never be fully restored, and that was okay. I no longer needed everyone to like me or approve of me. Reflecting on that whole journey, from the girl sketching dreams in her bedroom to the woman running a successful fashion label, the lessons learned are profound. The pain of being underestimated, of feeling invisible to the people who were supposed to see me most clearly, was immense, but in a strange way, that very dismissal became my most potent fuel. It forced me to dig deeper, to rely on my own inner strength, to become fiercely independent in my pursuit. I learned that believing in yourself, truly, deeply believing in your own vision, is paramount, especially when those around you are mired in doubt or limited by their own perspectives. True validation, I discovered, isn't something that can be bestowed by others, particularly not by those who are unwilling or unable to see your worth. It comes from within, from the satisfaction of hard work, from the joy of creation, from the quiet pride of overcoming obstacles. And it comes from the genuine support of a chosen few, friends like Chloe, mentors like Mr. Blank Henderson, a partner like Liam, a wise elder like Grandma May, who see your sparkle even when it's just a tiny flicker. They became my true family in many ways, the ones who nurtured my dreams instead of trying to prune them to fit a preconceived notion. Family, I learned, is defined by love, respect, and unwavering support, not just by blood ties. And sometimes the most important boundaries you set are with those closest to you, to protect your spirit and your path. So, that's how a room full of baby shower gifts, meant to celebrate one kind of beginning, inadvertently launched another, my own, very public, and deeply satisfying arrival. What about you? Have you ever had a moment where you got to gently, or not so gently, show the doubters exactly what you're made of? I genuinely love to read your stories, so please share them in the comments below. It's through sharing our experiences that we realize just how strong and resilient we can be. And if my journey resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the underdog fighting for your dream, please don't forget to give this video a like. And if you want to hear more stories about turning setbacks into setups for incredible success, or just navigating the messy, beautiful complexities of life and family, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Remember, your passion is valid, your dreams are profoundly important. Don't let anyone, no matter how well-meaning or how closely related, dim your sparkle or try to fit you into their conveniently sized box. Sometimes being underestimated isn't a disadvantage, it's the best superpower you can have. It allows you to build your empire in peace, use it, and then, when the time is right, shine on. You've earned it.